Supplier relationships and supplier agreements sit at the center of organizational interdependence. No enterprise today operates in isolation. Every business relies on vendors, partners, cloud providers, and service operators who extend both capability and risk. Controls A.5.19 and A.5.20 were designed to formalize how that reliance is governed, defining not only how suppliers are chosen, but also how they are monitored, held accountable, and managed across their entire lifecycle. The intent of these controls is to ensure that suppliers strengthen rather than weaken the organization's overall security posture. Suppliers inherently expand the attack surface, but with clearly assigned responsibilities, contractual safeguards, and continuous oversight, that expansion becomes manageable and defensible. Auditors, regulators, and customers alike expect evidence that due diligence is ongoing, not a one-time exercise frozen at contract signature. Understanding supplier relationships through a life cycle lens helps integrate security from the very beginning. The typical flow follows 6 stages: planning, selection, onboarding, operation, monitoring, and exit. At each stage, the organization evaluates risk posture, captures relevant documentation, and maintains an audit trail of actions and decisions. Planning defines requirements and acceptable risk levels. Selection evaluates potential vendors through structured criteria and due diligence checks. Onboarding establishes security baselines and control expectations before data exchange begins. The operational phase tracks service performance, compliance, and incident handling. Continuous monitoring ensures posture remains aligned with commitments, while exit management ensures data and access are cleanly terminated. This full life cycle approach embeds security into the procurement and vendor management processes rather than treating it as an isolated compliance checkpoint. Pre-engagement due diligence sets the tone for the entire supplier relationship. Security questionnaires tailored to supplier tier help gauge maturity and identify gaps early. Review of certifications, such as ISO/IEC 27001, SOC 2, or equivalent frameworks, provides third-party validation of a supplier's practices. Financial stability and jurisdictional exposure analyses add further insight into long-term reliability and potential geopolitical risk. Where feasible, sample control walkthroughs or technical demonstrations offer first-hand verification beyond paperwork. These preparatory steps protect against onboarding vendors that look good on paper but lack operational depth. They also form the foundation for future accountability, as early findings define baseline expectations for continuous improvement once the relationship begins. At the heart of modern vendor relationships lies shared responsibility. Few boundaries are truly one-sided. Data protection and system availability often rely on joint actions between the organization and its suppliers. RACI matrices clearly assign roles for control ownership at each boundary point. Who is responsible, who is accountable, who must be consulted, and who's simply informed. Data flow diagrams document handoffs, ensuring traceability of information movement and logging responsibilities. Incident management roles should be divided explicitly, leaving no ambiguity about who responds first and who communicates with stakeholders. Even performance metrics should have designated owners across both parties. This level of clarity prevents finger-pointing during crises and makes collaboration under stress more efficient. Supplier onboarding represents the transition from evaluation to operational partnership. During this stage, technical readiness and access control integration are validated. Identity federation between the supplier and the organization allows secure authentication without duplicating credentials, while least privilege scopes ensure that external access cannot overreach. Secure communication channels and key exchange processes must be established before any sensitive data is shared. Baseline configuration standards define what good looks like in logging, patching, and encryption practices. Finally, initial KPI and KRI targets are agreed upon, ensuring both parties measure performance and risk using shared indicators. This deliberate setup prevents many of the misunderstandings that plague poorly managed vendor launches. Once suppliers are operational, continuous monitoring ensures trust remains justified. Periodic attestations and evidence refresh cycles verify that certifications are valid and controls remain in force. Service-level agreements and performance indicators should be reviewed through a security lens, linking uptime and delivery metrics to risk outcomes rather than pure efficiency. Suppliers must provide timely notification of material changes to their security posture, such as breaches, ownership changes, or technology migrations. For higher-tier vendors, targeted audits or control testing may be required to validate claims. Monitoring is not a sign of distrust, it is an expression of shared accountability, ensuring that both customer and supplier evolve together as threats and technologies change. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Supplier agreements, covered under A.5.20, formalize the security and governance expectations established in A.5.19. Where the previous control focuses on the relationship and life cycle, this one embeds enforceable and measurable terms directly into contracts. A strong supplier agreement clearly defines the scope of services, data categories involved, and the jurisdictions in which processing will occur. Clauses protecting confidentiality, intellectual property, and record retention form the legal backbone of these documents. Cross-border transfer conditions must align with applicable data protection laws, ensuring lawful processing under frameworks like GDPR or National Privacy Acts. Every agreement should include right-to-audit provisions or, where direct audit isn't practical, alternative assurance mechanisms such as certified third-party reviews. These legal foundations transform supplier expectations from verbal promises into binding commitments that can withstand regulatory or contractual scrutiny. Security and performance obligations are reinforced through explicit service-level language. Availability, recovery, and resilience targets must be calibrated to business risk, with higher criticality services demanding tighter guarantees. Contracts should specify remediation timelines for vulnerabilities. By severity, critical issues might require fixes within days, while lower risk findings allow longer windows. Logging, retention, and evidence delivery expectations define how suppliers will support audits and investigations. Penalties or escalation clauses deter complacency, mandating corrective action or financial repercussions for repeated shortfalls. These contractual specifics shift discussions from vague assurances to measurable outcomes, giving both customer and supplier a shared framework for evaluating performance and compliance over time. Incident and breach obligations are a core part of supplier accountability. Agreements must define what constitutes a security incident, when notifications are required, and which channels must be used for reporting. Timelines should be explicit. Many regulations mandate disclosure within 24 to 72 hours, depending on jurisdiction. Cooperative investigation clauses ensure that both parties work together on root cause analysis, containment, and communication. Provisions for forensic preservation guarantee that evidence remains intact for regulators or litigation. Customer communication coordination clauses prevent conflicting messages and ensure consistent public response. These elements reflect the reality that breach response is not just technical, it's organizational and reputational. Contracts that handle these scenarios up front minimize chaos when an incident inevitably occurs. Data protection and privacy addenda have become indispensable extensions of supplier agreements, particularly in industries handling personal or regulated data. Processor and subprocessor obligations must be explicitly stated, ensuring that downstream vendors meet equivalent standards. Clauses addressing data residency, cross-border transfer, and localization provide assurance that information remains under lawful control. Requirements for deletion or return of data at contract termination must include proof artifacts, such as certificates of destruction or verified handback reports. Additionally, suppliers should assist with data subject rights, such as access or erasure requests, within defined timelines. These privacy clauses translate statutory expectations into enforceable operational behavior, making compliance a shared and measurable outcome.
Resilience and continuity commitments ensure that suppliers can sustain operations even under disruption. Contracts should require documented and tested business continuity and disaster recovery plans that align with the customer's recovery time and recovery point objectives. Dependencies and single points of failure must be disclosed so that risk can be assessed realistically. Periodic failover and backup verifications confirm that recovery processes actually work, not just exist on paper. For critical services, priority restoration clauses ensure that the customer's operations are restored promptly after an outage. In this way, resilience becomes an auditable performance metric rather than a marketing claim. A supplier's continuity planning directly reflects its maturity, accountability, and respect for the customer's mission.
Change and exit management clauses protect both parties during transitions. Material changes, such as mergers, technology stack alterations, or data center relocations, should trigger reassessment of security and compliance posture. Structured offboarding checklists ensure data is returned or destroyed securely and that accounts, keys, and connections are closed. Certificates verifying sanitization or destruction provide closure for audit and risk records. Transition assistance obligations help customers migrate to alternative providers without service disruption, while escrow arrangements can preserve critical code or data assets. These provisions ensure that the relationship ends as securely and professionally as it began, preventing lingering access or information leakage long after contracts expire. Evidence collection underpins the credibility of supplier governance. A tier register identifies all suppliers, their assigned risk levels, and the dates of last reviews. Due diligence packs include questionnaires, audit reports, and certifications with expiry tracking. SLA dashboards display performance metrics alongside security KRIs and KCI trends, providing transparency across the portfolio. Non-conformity logs and corrective action registers document issues and their resolution timelines. Internal and external audit samples demonstrate linkage between contract terms and operational proofs, confirming that suppliers not only commit to security but actively demonstrate it. This evidence transforms supplier oversight from a compliance narrative into an empirical practice anchored in measurable results. Common pitfalls in supplier governance remain surprisingly consistent across industries. Many organizations conduct robust initial vetting but fail to maintain operational follow-up, allowing controls to degrade silently. Contracts may contain vague clauses, phrases like reasonable security measures that offer no measurable enforcement path. Shadow subprocessors, engaged without visibility, can introduce uncontrolled risk into the ecosystem. Reliance on marketing claims or unverified certifications can create a false sense of assurance. Avoiding these traps requires continuous ownership, critical review, and a commitment to living oversight rather than annual checkbox audits. Supplier security is only as strong as the organization's willingness to sustain scrutiny over time. Fortunately, good practices are well established and highly effective when applied consistently. Standardized security addenda appended to master service agreements bring uniformity across contracts, simplifying oversight. Joint tabletop exercises and breach simulations with key suppliers test readiness under realistic conditions, improving coordination and communication. Continuous control monitoring, leveraging APIs or telemetry sharing, provides near real-time visibility into supplier posture changes. Annual strategic reviews allow both sides to recalibrate expectations, align metrics, and update requirements in response to new threats or technologies. These practices build genuine trust, earned through transparency, consistency, and mutual investment in resilience, rather than blind faith in paperwork. A.5.19 and A.5.20 together form the blueprint for a mature supplier security program. A.5.19 structures the relationship, defining how risk is identified, monitored, and evolved through its lifecycle. A.5.20 embeds that structure into binding agreements that hold both parties accountable for measurable outcomes. Together, they establish shared responsibility, clear metrics, and continuous evidence collection as the hallmarks of trustworthy partnerships. By applying these principles, organizations transform their supply chains from potential liabilities into demonstrable strengths. Ecosystems where every participant contributes to security assurance rather than diluting it. These foundations prepare the organization to go deeper in A5.21 and A5.22, where supply chain monitoring and ICT-specific dependencies become focal points for operational resilience and sustained trust.